Okay. Assalamu alaikum. This is the first video in the series of video lectures for chapter number 13, interest rate derivative instruments. We will be talking about four different kind of interest rate instruments. In this first video, we will be talking about interest rate futures. So what are the future? What is a future contract? I think we have discussed it before. Future contract is an agreement that requires a party to the agreement either to buy or sell something at a designated future date at a predetermined price. So basically, you are entering into agreement to buy something at a predetermined future date and predetermined price. Future contracts based on financial instruments or financial index are known as financial futures. So we will be talking about financial futures, and the financial futures can be classified as stock index futures, interest rate futures, and currency futures. We will be talking about interest rate futures in particular because we are dealing with interest rate risk or the managing or hedging of interest rate risk. Mechanics of future trading. So let's talk about in detail how futures are traded. A future contract is an agreement between a buyer and an established exchange or its clearing house. So it's basically agreement between a buyer or seller and a clearing house of the exchange, in which buyer or seller agrees to either take a delivery if it's a buyer or make a delivery if it's a seller of something which is the underlying asset. In our case, it's the interest rate should be an interest bearing instrument at a specified price at the end of a designated period of time. The price at which the parties agreed to transact is called the future price. So let's suppose we agree that I will purchase certain bond at let's suppose 100 rupees 3 months from now. So that 100 rupees is the future price. The designated date at which the parties must transact is called the settlement or delivery date. So 3 months from now, the specific date is a settlement date. How parties liquidate positions in a future contract. Most financial future contracts have settlement dates in the month of March, June, September, and December. Because these are exchange traded instruments, they have specific settlement dates. This means that a predetermined time in the contract settlement month, the contract stops trading and the price is determined by the exchange for the settlement of the contract. So after that, the contract will stop trading and exchange will determine the price. A party to a future contract has two choices on liquidation of the position. So when that date comes, the party has two choices. First, the position can be liquidated prior to the settlement date. So before that settlement date, you can liquidate your position. For this purpose, the party must take an offsetting position in some contract. So you have to take an opposite position. For the buyer of a future contract, this means selling the same number of identical future contracts. And for the seller, it means buying same number of identical future contracts. Alternatively, you can wait until the settlement date. At that time, the party purchasing a future contract accepts delivery of the underlying at the agreed upon price. The party that sells a future contract liquidates the position by delivering the underlying at the agreed upon price. For some interest rate future contract, settlement is made cash only. Such contracts are referred to as cash settlement contracts. So what we mean is that you only have to exchange the difference in the prices, not the actual underlying, but mostly you have to deliver the underlying, right? You have to deliver the underlying asset or the bond, whichever it is. The role of the clearing house in this is very important. When an investor takes a position in the future market, the clearing house takes the opposite position and agrees to satisfy the term set forth in the contract. Because the clearing house, the investor need not to worry about the financial strength or integrity of the party taking the opposite side of the contract. After initial execution of an order, the relationship between the two parties ends. The clearinghouse interposes itself as a buyer for every sale and seller for every purchase of the future contract. Thus, the investors are free to liquidate their position without involving the other party in the original contract, without worrying that the other party may default. This is the reason that we define future contract as an agreement between a party and clearinghouse. Besides, it's also guarantee function. The clearinghouse make it simple for parties of future contract to unwind their position prior to the settlement date. Although there are initial margin requirements. When a position is first taken in future contract, the investor must deposit a minimum dollar amount per contract is specified by the exchange. So, for example, if you are purchasing a future contracts of worth, let's suppose 1 million, you may be required to deposit 10% of the 100,000 amount. This amount is called the initial margin, and it is required to deposit for the contract. Initial margin can be cash or can be an interest-bearing security such as a treasury bill. As the price of the future contract fluctuates, the value of the margin account changes. Making to market means effectively replacing the initial price with the current settlement price. So what exchanges do is at the end of each trading day, the exchange determines the current settlement price for the future contract. This price is then used to mark the investor's position. So any gain or loss from position is reflected in the margin account. So let's suppose you have deposited 100,000. Now let's say that the price of the future contract changes and its price becomes from 1 million to 1.1 million. So now 10% of 1.1 million is 110,000, and you only have 100,000 in the account. You need to deposit extra 10,000 in the account, right? Okay. Maintenance margin is the minimum level specified by the exchange to which the margin account may fall as a result of unfavorable price movement before investor is required to deposit additional margin. The additional margin deposit is called the variation margin, and it is the amount necessary to bring account back to the initial margin level. This amount is determined from the process of marking the position to market. Unlike initial margin, variation margin must be in cash, not interest-bearing instrument. Any excess margin in account may be withdrawn by the investor. If a party to a future contract who is required to deposit variation margin fails to do so within 24 hours, the future position is closed out. Although there are initial and maintenance margin requirements for buying securities on margin, the concept of margin differs from securities and futures. When securities are acquired in margin, the difference between the price of the security and initial margin is borrowed from the broker. So it's borrowing and then buying the securities. Sorry. So the concept of margin is different for securities and the futures. For the futures contract, the initial margin in effect is serves as a good faith money, an indication that investor will satisfy the obligation of the contract. While for the securities, the margin is that you are borrowing some amount and then purchasing some securities from that borrowed amount, but also investing some of your own money. Let's little bit talk about a forward contract. A forward contract, just like a future contract, is an agreement for a future delivery of something at a specified price and designated period of time. But the thing is, it's not an standardized or exchange traded thing. So the future contracts are standardized agreements to the delivery date and the quality of deliverables and are traded in exchange, while the forward contracts are unstandardized, usually over the counter thing, and there is no clearinghouse, so there is a counterparty risk that the other party may fail. Future contracts are marked to market at the end of each derivative. Consequently, future contracts are subject to the interim cash flows, as additional margin may be required in the case of adverse price movements, as we just discussed. A forward contract may or may not be marked on the marked to the market depending on wishes of the two parties. For a forward contract that is not marked to market, there is no interim cash flow effects. Finally, parties in a forward contract exposed to the credit risk because either party may default on its obligation. So they are a little bit different from each other. Let's talk about something about the risk return characteristics of future contracts. When an investor takes a position in the market by buying a future contract, the investor is said to be a long position or be a long futures. If instead investor opening position is to sell future contract, the investor is said to be in a short position or to be short futures. The buyers of future contract will realize a profit. Sorry, if the future price increases, the seller of a future contract will realize profit if the future price decreases. When position is taken in a future contract, the party need not put up the entire amount of the investment. Instead, only initial margin must be put up. Consequently, an investor can effectively create a levered position by using future. At first, leverage available in the future market may suggest that the market benefit only those who want to speculate on the price movement. This is not true, as we shall see. Without an effective leverage position in future transition, the cost of reducing price risk using future would be too high for many market participants. Let's talk about the exchange traded versus over the counter. And in this, we will also talk about in detail about some examples of these. Okay. Interest rate future contracts can be classified by the maturity of their underlying security. Short-term interest rate future contracts have an underlying security that matures in less than 1 year. Examples are 3-month Treasury or 3-month Euro-dollar certificate. The maturity of underlying security of long-term future contracts exceeds 1 year. It can be underlying Treasury coupon security for 10-year agency note or a municipal bond. Our focus will be on future contract in which underlying security is a Treasury coupon security. These contracts are most widely used by managers of bond portfolios, and we begin with the specification of the Treasury bond future contract. We will also discuss the agency note future contracts. Okay. So let's talk about Treasury bond futures. Treasury bond futures are traded on Chicago Board of Trade, CBOT. So whenever now onwards I refer to exchange, I am basically referring to the Chicago Board of Trade, CBOT, right? The underlying instrument for Treasury bond future contract is 100,000 par value of a hypothetical 20-year coupon bond. The coupon rate on a hypothetical bond is called the notional coupon. The future price in terms of par being 100, the quotes are in 30 seconds of 1%. Therefore, a quote for a Treasury bond future contract of 97.16 means 97 and 16 by 32, which means 97.5. So if a buyer and a seller agrees on a future price of 97.16, this means the buyer agrees to accept delivery of the hypothetical underlying Treasury bond and pay 97.5%, which means 97,500. The minimum price fluctuations for a treasury coupon treasury bond future contract is 1/32 of 1%, which is a 30-second, referred to as a 30-second, and the dollar amount will be equal to a 31.25. Thus, the minimum price fluctuation is $31.25. We have been referring to the underlying as a hypothetical treasury bond. The seller of a treasury bond future contract who decides to make delivery rather than liquidate the position by buying back the contract prior to the settlement date must deliver some treasury bond issue. So, but what treasury bond issue? Which treasury bond issue the seller should deliver? What exchange do is they allow seller to deliver one of several treasury bonds that exchange designates as acceptable for delivery. The specific issues that seller may deliver are published by the exchange for all contracts by settlement date. So the exchange makes its determination of the treasury bond issue that are acceptable for delivery for all outstanding treasury issues that have at least 50 years of maturity from the date of delivery. Although underlying treasury bond for this contract is hypothetical issue and therefore cannot itself be delivered into the future contract, the contract is not a cash settlement contract. The only way to close out a treasury bond future contract is to either initiate an offsetting future position or to deliver a treasury bond issue satisfying above mentioned criteria into the future contract. So here are some examples. So these are the settlement dates, and these are the acceptable treasury issues. So for example, for March 2015, there are around 25 number of eligible issues that can be delivered. Here for June 2005, 24, and as we go on, this number decreases. It decreases because the 15-year maturity is not valid for this. So here it's a less than 15-year maturity, right? Okay. Let's talk about, when we talk about the delivery, we need to talk about the conversion factor. The delivery process for the treasury bond futures contract makes the contract interesting. At the settlement date, the seller of the future contract, which is the short, is now required to deliver the buyer 100,000 par value of 6% 20-year treasury bond. Since no such bond exists, the seller must choose from one of the acceptable delivery bonds that the exchange has specified. So seller have to choose from one of these bonds for one of these delivery dates. Suppose the seller is entitled to deliver 100,000 of a 5% 20-year bond to settle the future contract. The value of this bond is less than the value of 6% 20-year bond, obviously, because it's a 60% coupon and that is a 5% coupon. If the seller delivers this bond, 5% 20-year bond, this would be unfair to the buyer of the future contract who contracted to receive a 6% 20-year 100,000 bond. Alternatively, suppose a seller delivers 100,000 of a 7% 20-year bond. The value of a 7% 20-year bond is greater than that of a 6%, and again this is for here the seller will be on disadvantage. So how this can this problem be resolved? To make delivery of equitable to both parties, the exchange has introduced conversion factor for adjusting the price of each treasury bond that can be delivered to satisfy treasury bond future contract. The conversion factor is determined by exchange before a contract with a specified settlement date begins trading. The adjustment price is found by multiplying the conversion factor by future price. The adjusted price is called the converted price. So here we can see these are the conversion factors for each kind of issue for each date, right? So they are reported by the exchange. Conversion factor are shown by contract settlement date. Note that the conversion factor depends not only on the issue delivered but also the settlement date. For example, look at the first issue here. If it's delivered in March, conversion factor is 0.9062. If it's delivered in December of 2005, conversion factor is 0.9075. The price that the buyer must pay to the seller when the treasury bond is delivered is called the invoice price. The invoice price is the future settlement price plus accrued interest rate. However, as just noted, the seller can deliver one of the several acceptable treasury issues, and to make delivery fair to both parties, the invoice price must be adjusted based on the actual treasury issue delivered. So the invoice price can be calculated as contract size into future settlement price into conversion factor plus the accrued interest, and this will give us the invoice price. Okay. Now suppose the treasury March 2016 future contract settles at 105.16, which means 105.5%, and that the issue delivered is 8%, 11.15.21. So the issue delivered here is 8%, 11.15.21. This issue, right? And it's a March contract, so the conversion is 1.2077. Okay, sorry, because it's a March 2016, it's 1.2000. So we can calculate the invoice price, which will be 100 times 1.055 times 1.2. Why we are multiply by 1.055 is because the settlement is 105.5, and we have to then add the accrued interest. The answer we will get will be 126 plus any 126,600 plus any accrued interest. I think the example is clear, right? Okay. If not, just go through it in the chapter, and if you have any question, you can ask on the forum. What is the cheapest to deliver issue? Now, this is very interesting, and you have to pay attention here. As can be seen in Exhibit 1, there can be more than one issue that is permitted to deliver to satisfy a future contract. In fact, for March 2005, there are 25 such issues. The decision of which one of the bond issues a short will select to deliver is not made arbitrarily. So it's not a random decision. There is some economic analysis which is involved. In fact, as we will see, all the elements that go into the economic analysis will be the same for all participants. The basic principle is as follows. Suppose that investor enters into the following two transactions simultaneously, buys one of the deliverable bond issued today with borrowed money and sells a future contract. One of deliverable bond issued today with a borrowed money and then sells a future contract, right? The two positions, i.e. the long position in the deliverable bond issue purchase and the short position in the future contract, will be held to the delivery date. At the delivery date, the bond issue purchase will be used to satisfy the short obligation to deliver the eligible bond issue. The simultaneous transaction above and the delivery of the acceptable bond issue purchase to satisfy the short position in the future contracts is called, this is called a cash and carry trade. So basically what you are doing is you are using cash and purchasing that bond and settling that future contract with that cash. We will discuss this in more detail in next chapter. Let's look at the economics of this cash and carry trade. The investor has synthetically created a short-term investment vehicle. The reason is that investor has purchased a bond issue and at the delivery date delivers the bond issue to receive the future price. So the investors knows the cost of buying the bond issue and knows how much will be received from the investment. The amount is the coupon interest until the delivery date, any reinvestment income from the investment coupon payments, and the future price of the delivery date, right? So you will be receiving three things. You will be receiving coupon interest until the delivery date. You will be receiving any reinvestment on that coupon investment and the future price. Thus, the investor can calculate the rate of return that will be earned on the investment. In the future market, the rate of return is called the implied repo rate. So we have to calculate the implied repo rate for each deliverable bond. An implied repo rate can be calculated for every deliverable bond issue. For example, suppose there are n deliverable bond issue that can be delivered to satisfy bond future content. Market participants who want to know either best issue to deliver, they have to calculate the n, the implied repo rate for those n bond issues. Since the implied repo rate is the rate of return on an investment, the best bond issue is the one that has the highest implied repo rate. Implied repo rate can be computed using the following information. So you need the price plus accrued interest at which the treasury bond could be purchased, the convertible price plus the accrued interest that will be received upon delivery of the treasury bond issue to satisfy the short future position, the coupon payment that will be received between today and the date of the issue is delivered, the reinvestment income that will be realized on the coupon payment between the time of the interim coupon payment received and the date to satisfy. The first three elements are known. The last element will depend on the reinvestment rate that can be earned. While the reinvestment rate is known, typically this is not known. It's a small part, so we can ignore it. The general formula for calculating the rate, implied repo rate, is dollar return divided by cost of investment into 360 into number of days. Days one is equal to the number of days until the settlement of the future contracts. So the dollar return is basically the difference between the proceeds received and the cost of investment. The proceeds received are equal to the proceeds received at the settlement date of the future contract and any interim coupon payment plus interest from investing the interim coupon payment. The proceeds received at the settlement date includes converted price and the accrued interest received from the delivery of the issue. That is, proceeds received are converted price plus accrued interest received plus interim coupon payment plus interest from investing in the interim coupon payment. As noted earlier, all of the elements are known except the reinvestment interim coupon payment. Reinvestment on interim coupon payment. The term repo is not. This amount is estimated by using the term repo rate. The term repo rate not only is a borrowing rate for investor who wants to borrow in the repo market, but also the rate at which investor can invest proceeds on the short-term basis. For how long reinvestment of the interim coupon payment, it's a number of days. So the how long you invest the coupon payment is the number of days between when you receive the coupon payment and when you have to deliver the future. So interim interest from reinvestment in reinvesting the interim coupon payment is interim coupon in times term repo rate times days 2 into 360. So days 2 is this time period. The reason for dividing days 2 by 360 is that the ratio represents days of interim coupon is reinvested as a percentage of number of days in the year. The cost of investment is then the purchase price plus accrued interest you pay on the bond. Thus, the dollar return is proceeds received minus cost of investment. Let's take an example to calculate all these. So let's assume that this is the future contract. The future price is 96. Days of future delivery date is 82 days until you deliver it. Deliverable issues you are considering. So we have to consider each of the deliverable issue and compute their repo rates. But here we are considering only one. The price of the issue is 107. Accrued interest paid is 3.8904. Coupon rate is 10%. Days remaining before interim coupon paid is remaining before interim coupon days is 40 days. So it's 40 days until you will receive the coupon, and interim coupon is 5, and then you will invest that coupon is 42. So you will reinvest that coupon for 42 days. Conversion factor is 1.11111. Accrued interest received at the future settlement date is 1.1507. Other information, 42 days term repo rate is 3.8. Let's begin with proceeds received. So what you will be receiving? You will be receiving the future price. So the future price is calculated from the converted price, and the converted price can be calculated by multiplying the future price with conversion factor. Conversion factor is 1.1111. Future price is 96. So the converted price is 106.66656. The interest from investing the interim coupon payment depends on the repo rate. The term repo rate is assumed to be 3.8%. Therefore, interest from reinvesting interim coupon 5 into 0.038, 42 divided by 360 equal to 0.0222. To summarize, converted price, accrued interest received at a future settlement date 1.1507, interim coupon payment 5, and interest from investing in interim coupon payment 0.0222. So this is given, this we have calculated, this is given, this is we have calculated. So proceeds received are 112.8385. The cost of investment is the price you have paid for the bond, which is 107, and accrued interest received at a future settlement date, which is 1.1507. Sorry, and the accrued interest paid, which is 3.8904. So 3.8904, and the cost of investment is 110.908. So using that formula, the return will be the proceed received minus cost divided by cost into 360 divided by 82, 7.71%. So this 7.71% represents the it represents the repo rate. Once the implied repo rate is calculated for each deliverable issue, so we have to calculate this for all of the deliverable issues. The cheapest to deliver issue will be the one that has the highest implied repo rate. As explained in the next chapter, when we will discuss the pricing. This issue plays a key role in pricing of a treasury bond future contract. When eligible bond issue may be the cheapest to deliver today, changes in factor may cause some other eligible bond issues to be cheaper and deliver at the future date. A sensitivity analysis can be performed to determine how changes in yield affects the cheapest to deliver bond. The other, it's the cheapest to deliver issue. The last two things we have to discuss is one, other delivery options. In addition to choice of which acceptable trigger issue to deliver, sometimes referred to as the quality option or swap option. The short has at least two more options granted under the exchange delivery guidelines. The short is permitted to decide when to deliver within a month. It is called the timing option. The short also have to have the right to give notice of intent delivery up to 8 p.m. Chicago time after closing of the exchange. This is called the wildcard option. The quality option, the timing option, and the wildcard option together, they are called delivery option. Delivery procedure is for a short who wants to deliver. The delivery procedure involves 3 days, 3 different days. The first day is the position day. On this day, the shard notifies the exchange that it intends to deliver. The second day is the notice day. On this day, shard specifies which particular issue will be delivered. And the third day is the delivery day. On which day the shard will deliver the issue. We can also talk about treasury note futures and agency note futures, which are exactly similar. Just to have a clear concept, go through these two short topics on page 371 of the chapter. Thank you.